Okay, hello and welcome. I'm Travis McEwen, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you a little bit more about some Cisco devices, talking a bit about the basic configs, um, and general navigation through our Cisco command line. So, what you see in front of you right now is our Cisco packet tracer. Remember, you can get this by logging into Netacad and going to the Resources tab and then download Packet Tracer. Make sure that you're using the latest version for this class, which is 8.0.1. So, as a reminder how we use Packet Tracer, in the bottom left-hand corner here, we have the different devices that we can select. And in front of us is our white space and our kind of logical workspace that we can play around with. So what we're going to start with for just demonstrating some basic configs is we're going to go down to the bottom here where it says in the bottom left hand corner where it says network devices, and then the very bottom section which says switches. And we're just going to select switches and then grab a 2960 and just place it right in the middle. Now, as you can see, the device is now booting up. If you don't want to wait for it to boot up, you can always hit this little fast forward button and it will speed up the time for this device and it will get booted up. So a couple things that we are going to kind of get into is we're going to talk about some of the basic commands and configuration for our device. So looking over it right at the start, the first run level that we need to remember that we're at is when you initially log into any device, you are at the user exec level. So at this level, remember, there's very few commands that we can actually execute. So it's just some basic network connectivity commands and some other basic show commands that exist on this device. In order to move further into it, we want to move to the privileged exec mode. In privileged exec mode, we can enter it by typing in the enable command. At this run level, we can start to do a lot more and view a lot more of the system of the actual device itself, run the same some or some of the same level of diagnostic tests, but it's typically a section that we can use to show the running configuration and the current setups of our device. So moving further, our next run level is our global configuration mode. So we can do that by typing in configuration terminal. But remember with Cisco, we can do shorthand with it because if there's only one command that starts with conf, it will automatically understand that we are looking for configure. So another short way of doing it is we can say conft because there's only one command that starts with T after configure, which is terminal. So we can say conft or configure terminal. So this is our global configuration mode. So again, remember our three modes are user, exec, privileged, exec, and global configuration. So these are our three modes that we typically use. And user exec, remember, is our initial prompt that we see. Privileged exec, we use the enable command to get into. And global configuration, we use the configure terminal command in order to get into those different run levels. So getting into kind of some of the different commands and configurations, a couple of things to do is we can look at our current running configuration. To do this, we use the show command, and we can say show running dash config. Or another way of just typing it again is just show run because there's only one command that starts with run, even just R. So I could just say show R and it will show me my current running configuration. So here we see uh, the initial running configuration. So these are the things that the switch actively has set to do. Right now it's a basic command, so there's no, or basic configuration, because I just booted this device up, so there's no configs on it. It's a blank slate. So a couple things to kind of note is what we're going to be doing is making some basic changes to this device. Now, to do this, I can't do it in privilege exec mode, so we have to do it in a higher level mode, which is our global configuration mode. So we'll go back to conft. Now, a couple things that we're going to change is we are going to start by changing the host name. So this is going to be the name of the actual device that we log into. So we can do that with the host name command, and we can set it to something like S1. Now, let's say you forget a command or are not 100% sure what that command is. What we can do if you're like, I know I need to change the name of the device, but I can't remember exactly what I need to do. You can hit the question mark button from anywhere that you are. You don't have to press enter, just the question mark. And it will give you a list of the commands that you can run and what we can actually from that specific run level. So you can see just from typing in the global configuration mode, I did a question mark, and we can go through and we can go, okay, well, I know I need to change the name of the device. We can see that it says host name set systems network host name. So, we start setting host name, but let's say we forget what to type in after host name. We can hit question mark again, and it'll tell us what the next step of the command actually is. So in this case, it's saying, what's the network device's name? And in this case, I had already typed in S1. So the next type of thing that we want to kind of set up is we typically want to place a password on our different run levels and methods of getting into the device. So a couple things that we're going to do is we're going to say uh, we're going to set our password on the two methods of being able to connect into our device, which is the line con 0, which is the console port, so console 0. So this is the physical method of if I had a rollover cable, or what's known as also called a console cable, and had a physical connection into the actual device itself, this is where I'd be entering in the password. So at this point, I would say password, and we'll just type in Cisco. And then the next thing that we have to do is we have to actually apply the password to the interface. So at this point, just typing in password Cisco, the password exists, but it's not activated. It's not being utilized. So to actually apply it so that it will be prompted or prompt anyone when they try and log into it, we have to use the login command. So we say line con 0, and then password Cisco, and then login. And then that actually applies it. So then we'll also go to what's known as our VTY interfaces. And what I'm going to do really fastly before we get into the VTY is our for remote access. Um, it's our remote links into it. So via, say, Telnet or SSH into these devices. So if I wanted to say, let's look at our running configuration. And I'm going to enter in a command called do show run really quickly, and I'll come back to this again. But the do command is a way for us to run commands at different run levels. If you're familiar with Linux kind of thing, you can almost kind of think of it like a sudo, right? Even though this command doesn't exist underneath global configuration mode, because I'm at a higher level of permission and there are commands that exist underneath me at privilege exec mode, I can say, hey, I know this command doesn't exist at this higher level, but I still want to do it, and it exists below me. So therefore, if I'm at the higher level, the permissions and commands that are below me should still be allowed for me to use. So Do is a way for us to run commands when we're at a higher level of permissions and not have to move back and forth between different run levels. So I am saying do show run. And so we're going to look at our VTY links. So our VTYs, we have what's you can see line VTY 04 and then line VTY 5 through 15. So we have a total of 16 connections. So what this VTY link is telling us is that overall, I can have a total of 16 concurrent Telnet or SSH connections into this actual device. Now, typically, what we're not going to see that number at any point in time, but we're thinking of it along the lines of there might be times where we set up different levels of permissions for different users. So we can set up multiple user accounts, multiple passwords, and assign those to different levels of permissions and access on this actual device via these VTY lines. Now, that gets a lot deeper into what we're going to than what we need to know right now, but that's the general gist overall. So what we typically are going to configure is we're going to configure a password for right now for all of our lines. So again, VTY is just for our remote connections over, say, like an Ethernet cable, so Telnet or SSH. So we're going to go in and we're going to say line VTY 0 space 15, and this will basically mean that I'm applying configurations for all points on the VTY. And here we'll do the exact same thing that we did on the console. We'll say password, and we'll, in this case, I'm just going to use Cisco. Remember, in the real world, don't use a dictionary word. Definitely don't use Cisco. But for the purpose of just demonstrating the lab, this is okay. So we're going to say password Cisco, and then same thing, we're going to apply it with the login command. So now I have now set passwords for both the line console 0 and for the VTY. So now if anyone tries to log into this device, before they can see the user exec mode, the initial prompt, they're going to be met with or challenged with a password. So the next thing that we want to do is place a password on our privileged exec mode. And to do this, we'll exit out. And what we're going to do is we're just going to say enable secret class. And this will place a password on the enable section. Now, there's two ways to set passwords for the privileged exec mode. One, which was enable secret class, which I just showed you. The other option is we can use the enable password level or password command. Now, they both do the same thing. However, secret will automatically encrypt the password, where password will just leave in the running configuration, will leave the password in a plain text viewing. So whenever you're setting up a enable password, it's always recommended that you use the more secure option right out of the gate. So if you're ever asked, hey, set a password for privilege exec mode, you should assume that it means enable secret unless directly specified otherwise in any of our labs. So make sure that you remember that between the differences between those two. So let's say I accidentally set an incorrect password. I didn't want the password to be class. I wanted it to be something else. Um, to remove a command or remove the command that I just entered in right there, we can say no, and then we'll place, say, enable secret class. Or you can just say no enable secret, and it will remove the prior command that you just entered in. Now, in this case, I still want this command in, so I'm going to put it back with enable secret class. But if at any point in time you enter in something incorrectly, or you're like, darn, I didn't mean to do that, to remove what you just did, type no, and then the command that you just entered, and it will remove what you just did. Okay, so now we have our passwords on our console, our VTY, and also on our privilege exec mode. So the next thing, and we have a host name. So the next thing that we want to set up is a banner message of the day. So we'll say banner, and then again, if you're not sure what to do, remember, always hit the question mark. But in this case, it's MOTD, and MOTD just stands for message of the day. And so we'll just say something like authorized use only. Now, the importance of a banner message of the day is that this is a way for us to basically have, it's like a no trespassing sign. It's us stating that only people that are allowed to have access into this device should have access to this device. So if someone tries to break into this device and they say, well, it said, their banner said, come on in, um, the legal repercussions that I might have are very minimum or minimal. So those are things to kind of keep in mind. So a banner message of the day is essentially a no trespassing sign. It's a good way to kind of protect your systems right out of the gate from a legal standpoint. So always good to have one. Doesn't have to be complicated or long. Just something like authorized use only is good enough. So the next thing that we want to do is I want to make sure that if we take a look at our current running configs, we can see that I have my host name there. We can see that my enable secret is there, and my password's nice and all jumbled. We can see down at the bottom, we have a banner message of the day, and then we can see our line con 0 and our line VTY, and we can see our password are set to Cisco. Now, it's not great for your passwords to be in plain text, especially when you're making changes to this. So one of the things that we like to do, or that's recommended to do, is to encrypt these passwords when so that we can't view them just with a show run. This helps prevent shoulder surfing attacks. So if there's someone behind me while I'm working on a device, it'll help prevent them from being able to view this. Same thing if in the event that someone was able to get into their systems, having them stored so that they're not plain text is always a good thing um, in the event that someone is able to dump a running config of our systems. So to encrypt our passwords, we can use the service password dash encryption command. And what that will do is it will turn on service password encryption for the entirety of the switch. So any password that was in plain text is now going to be encrypted. So if we look at our show run again, our VTY and our con 0 are no longer readable. So yay, it worked. Okay, so last couple things that I'm going to go over for our basic commands here are one, here's kind of a quality of life command. So typically, it's not going to be seen right now, but typically when we have a large number of devices connected up, sometimes there's some automated messages that are going to be constantly going back and forth and will be displayed on the actual device that you're working on. The downside, normally that's good because we want to see that information. But the downside to that is that it will interrupt you while you are typing out your current command, and it will not separate things out and keep just interrupt you right in the middle of what you were typing. So to stop that issue from occurring, we can use the logging. We have to go into our line con 0, and we use the logging synchronous command. And we also want to go to our line VTY 0 through 15, and we'll also apply that command as well. And so what this command does is anytime that there is an update that would be displayed on my current terminal that I'm working on, instead of it interrupting me while I'm typing, it will print that information onto a new line, and it will not interrupt me while I'm typing. So it doesn't break up the command that I'm currently typing, which is very, very frustrating when you get a large number of alerts, especially if they're the exact same error alert continuously. Now, with the actual command itself, logging synchronous, where it's applied on the console line or on the VTY line. Now, the reason it's applied there is you want to apply it to how you're accessing the device. So um, remember, in Packet Tracer, we can just click on the device and it will show us the terminal. In real world, we have to either have a physical connection into the device, or we have to be able to SSH and or telnet into the device. So we apply logging synchronous to how we're accessing the device so that those alerts won't interrupt us based off of where we are. So if I'm configuring the device via the console port, an alert comes through, logging synchronous will kick in. If I'm configuring the device via telnet or SSH, logging synchronous goes on the VTY. All right. Final command that I'm going to show really quickly is uh, sometimes you can fat finger a command. So for instance, if I just type in Flurgablar into the translate and press enter, you'll see that it starts going translating this into domain server. What this is essentially doing is it's trying to think of, is this an alias? Does this mean something to someone or to a different device? It means nothing to me, but maybe this set of keystrokes means a specific set of commands that I'm supposed to do. And if it knew what to do, it would point to, and it was registered, it would call out to a domain server and ask for what that alias is. Now, right now it's sending out a broadcast. It's just asking anyone for what this is. And here's the downside: for this entire time that I've been talking, this thing has been stuck. So uh, we're going to fast forward time a little bit so that I can get the command back. And you'll see that it says unknown command or computer name, and we're unable to find the computer address. So it fails. In the real world, this, if you fat finger it, will lock you up for about, anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple minutes. It's very frustrating. So to ensure that we don't have this issue, we'll go back into global configuration mode and we'll type in the command no IP domain dash lookup. And what this will do is now it will say, right, if I mess up a command, I just messed it up. Don't go looking for something that doesn't actually exist. It's not an alias. It's not something that you should look up. So if I go back here and same thing, I fat finger it, instead of it trying to go and figure out what that means, it'll just automatically kick it back to me and say, right, that's not a thing. And it gives me command back. So very good quality of life command here. All right, so we'll do one more show run and just go over our commands one last time, and then we'll call it a day. So things that we did: we set our host name to S1. We turned on password encryption for all of our plain text passwords. We set a privileged exec password with the enable secret command. We turned on turned off the IP domain lookup command. So now if I fat finger a command, it won't lock me out for a few minutes. So no IP domain lookup. We set our banner message of the day, which is our no trespassing sign. We set a password for our console port. we set a password for our VTY links. So whether, remember, our console is for physical connection with a rollover cable, or VTY is for our Telnet or SSH remote connections. And then we set logging synchronous as well, so that if there are any update messages that display on the terminal, they don't interrupt us and it gets printed on a new line. All right, so that's a general list of some of the basic commands and basic configs that we have. Good thing to note about these is that everything that we did right here on these commands can be directly applied and utilized on a router as well. So any basic command that config that we just did on a switch, you also do the exact same thing on a router for Cisco. So hopefully that was helpful. If you have questions, feel free to let me know. Thanks. Bye.